I'd like to turn it over to Barry, who is our BayREN rep from San Francisco and who's going to be has a lot of experience with reach codes and is going to be moderating our panel this morning.
Great. Thank you, Karen. So good morning. I'm Barry Hooper. I've been working for the City of San Francisco in the Department of Environment for about 10 years. And in that time, San Francisco's maintained a reach code over Title 24 for all of the code cycles back to the 2008 energy standards. And that's included introducing, in partnership with Oakland, electric vehicle readiness expansion beyond CalGreen, mandatory solar for buildings up to 10 stories, and kind of a litany of other issues. But as you might guess, San Francisco might be a little bit of an exceptional place, right? And we certainly try to emphasize that a lot of the time. And that's not the topic of today's panel. We want to zoom out and we want to ask what's going on in maybe a little bit more the norm of the built environment and the politics of the Bay Area, so the surrounding area. And actually, I think the story that we're going to hear today is more similar than you might expect. So if we look at the CEC's website, what's the set of communities that have applied for CEC approval for a reach code in the 2016 standards? There have been 18 communities statewide that have made that application, and 14 of them are located here in the Bay Area. So there's really a concentration, and that's actually a huge growth from the past code cycle. So for the 2013 standards, there were 6 communities statewide, and only a couple of us in the Bay Area. So it's been a huge growth in support from some of the organizations that Karen shared with us, particularly I think the BayREN and the statewide codes and standards team. And we want to hear from not just the sustainability staff, but really the building officials, the people who are charged with the legal responsibility to implement these codes. What are the challenges and successes that they've been through in adopting and implementing reach codes in recent years? So we're going to have 3 panelists, and I'd like to ask you each to come up. I'm going to be joined by Karen Kinser, Deputy Director of Public Works for the City of Brisbane. She is a licensed civil engineer, been working for the city for, with more than 30 years of experience, managed the city's capital planning program, and also the Citizens Advisory Committee that oversees land use and sustainability. Was instrumental in Brisbane earning a Gold Beacon Award from the Institute for Local Government back in 2015. And so what could you share with us? Sorry, I might have these out of order, so I'm just going to do all of you and ask you to come up. And then we're going to look and see which slide comes up first, and that person is going to present first. So why don't you have a seat, Karen? But glad to have you. I'm also joined by Jason Crapo. Come on up, Jason. He's the Deputy Director for the Department of Conservation Development for the Contra Costa County. And he's been serving the county for more than 20 years. And particularly as a building official since 2009, who's instrumental in the design of the BayREN Codes and Standards program and has been contributing to it since its inception back in 2012. And then we're also joined by Bill Kelley. Bill Kelley, Deputy Director of Building Inspection and Safety for Marin County. Bill has 47 years of experience in the industry, working his way up, including 11 years as a chief building official for Marin County. You must have started your career back at age 4 or 5. We're so glad to have you. And Bill has chaired the CalBO State Licensing Committee. He's contributed to numerous industry boards and panels, and was instrumental and co-author of AB 2335, which upgraded and standardized the disclosure of liability for owner-builder building permit applications. So we're really glad to have your perspective on the panel today. Karen, it turns out you do get to lead off, so welcome.
Hi, my name is Karen Kinser, as Barry said, and I work for the City of Brisbane. We are, if you're not familiar with Brisbane, very small community in the northern peninsula. People often confuse it with Burlingame, I guess. We have a mix of residential, commercial, industrial, so reasonable plan. We adopted a solar reach code in 2017. That's what we're talking about today. So background. This reach code opportunity came about because San Mateo, we followed along with the city of San Mateo, and they'd adopted a solar reach code. So the goal was for the city energy conservation and the use of renewables versus fossil fuels. There definitely was a culture that made it possible and made it pretty easy actually to adopt the code. We have actually a full-time sustainability staff person. We have an active sustainability citizen advisory committee, and that's been around for 20 years, and just council members very positive and asking for things like this and wanting to forward on sustainability. That has to do with getting the Beacon Award. That motivated them and kind of got things moving. So we had, back in 2007, a Green Building Ordinance Subcommittee, so that was Planning Commission staff and then the Sustainability Committee working together, and we adopted some Build Agreed standards for residential and LEED Silver for commercial construction of a certain size. And so that kind of built some momentum. That committee started meeting again in 2015, but then didn't get anywhere with reach codes because the 2016 Title 24 was coming out and kind of weren't ready, but it created momentum. Climate Action Plan is consistent with adopting such a code. And what I learned in this process, I'm in the Public Works Department, but our planning department staff kind of carried this ordinance through, and I just learned that when they met with the Planning Commission, every time a new building was going through a design review, the Planning Commission was saying, why aren't they putting solar on the roof? Why can't we make them? Well, we can't make them. Why aren't they doing it voluntarily? So there was a lot of groundswell when this opportunity came along. The timing was great. And again, with the adoption cycle, both happened at the same time, so it dovetailed really nicely together. So ordinance highlights, I'm not going to go through the whole slide, but we kind of followed San Mateo. We had the cool roofs. We had an on-ramp amount of solar for residential, for commercial, for mixed use, and exceptions if you do solar thermal, and infeasibility exemptions, stated facing the right way for the reasons that make sense. Next slide. Again, San Mateo followed their cost effectiveness study. So the criteria for selection were we're in the same climate zone. We have a similar residential development floor area trend, ease of implementation of a prescriptive ordinance, and again, we had modest requirements for kind of an on-ramp for people to decide how to right size in the case of residential. So I was asked to talk about what is the lift for staff, and a lot of this was done again by planning staff, but just kind of walk through the process. So decide you're going to go forward. You've got kind of your model. So you review what's out there. Who else has a code? What fits? Does the model meet the goals of the agency? Is the cost benefit study already done, or are you going to have to do one and cost? Take the ordinances that you've got that you want to model. You've got to reformat them to meet your own model, your own format. Then there was the series of public meetings. So because we didn't adopt in the planning zoning regulations, we adopted in the building code. It wasn't required process through the planning commission, but there still was an informational meeting, and that was a chance to get their feedback, get their support, and have a place for the public to come and speak about it. And then sustainability citizen advisory committee, open space and ecology, also got to meet and review and get informed and offer feedback with another public opportunity. And then when we got to council, there had been these chances for public input, and then there was that public hearing. And all the way through that process, we didn't get any opposition, which was amazing, I guess. So it was adopted, and then there's a little bit more staff lift even after that. We did outreach with an article in our local newspaper to publicize. Social media would also be a good place to do that. We updated our building web pages, solar web pages, and we have building planning handouts for contractors and the public. And then the staff, I'd say training in quotes because we're small, so it wasn't formal training, but you want to get the word out to staff. Since then, we've started an internal staff newsletter that's quarterly. So something like that in there. It'd be a great place to do that. And then there's still other little cascading maybe activities. One big thing was to amend our height exception ordinance. So we had issue with people wanting to put solar on existing buildings, and it has just been kind of a bog down for them because now they've got to figure out what the height, if their building is below the maximum height allowed in their zoning district to begin with, so they've probably got to get a surveyor when you normally don't put solar on your roof. And then if you are above the height limit, you've got to go through a variance process with the planning commission. It's like kind of overwhelming. So this height exception ordinance then streamlines that and makes it a lot simpler. We also considered impacts such as to tree removal ordinances. Now, you're going to maybe let someone remove a tree that they didn't if they want to put solar on. So those cascading effects that you need to think about. Slide. So lessons learned at our staff, our council, our influencers, we're all really motivated to do this, but you're not in that situation. You've got to get them educated. At some points, we were hearing, an example was we were looking at doing solar in our city hall, and we were looking at a power purchase agreement in our council. That, why aren't we getting bids on that? I'm not really sure. And then after they came back from the League of Cities, they were like, why aren't we doing power purchase agreements? Find the right way to educate them. Find a nexus with your champions. What's in it for them? What's their priority? Win over the right people first. And then in a smaller agency, I think for us, there was an advantage to knowing the landscape, working between departments, being able to have those communications, knowing who the other staff people were that were involved. So, and just to close, looking forward, the city is doing a couple more things related to forest planning, hoping to do a couple more things related to REACH code. One is working on a building energy and transparency ordinance that's energy and water for commercial. Put an ordinance together similar to what San Francisco has, but we're hoping to require audits and maybe even improvements. And our staff, Adrian Etherton, who's here today, is kind of manning that. So if you're interested in hearing about that, we're hoping that get some momentum. And air quality did get us a grant, hoping, imagining that other people would want to follow suit. And we're also very interested in exploring the adoption of electrification REACH code in the future. Here's a big reveal later today. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Jason?
Is that better? All right. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jason Crapo. I'm the building official for Contra Costa County. I wanted to introduce Damian Hardman, who's standing back there. Damian's our Contra Costa BayREN rep. Thank you, BayREN, for supporting this meeting today. Our county's benefited tremendously from participating in BayREN over the years, and I really would want to encourage everybody here to continue attending BayREN events. It's a wonderful partnership, so thank you, BayREN. I want to talk a little bit about our county's experience with 2 REACH codes that have come before our Board of Supervisors over the last few years. One of them was adopted and one was not. So share a little bit about that experience. A little bit about our jurisdiction. Damian and I both work for the county's Department of Conservation and Development, which is the county's planning and building department. And so we serve the unincorporated area of the county. That's what county building departments generally do, is serve the unincorporated area. We also have contractual relationships with 5 of the 19 cities in our county, where we serve as their building inspection department. So we're serving an area that extends from Kensington, which is an unincorporated community next to Berkeley on the Alameda County line, all the way out to Discovery Bay, which is a community out in the San Joaquin Delta. We serve a population of about 300,000 people. It's a mix of urban, suburban, and rural communities, residential, commercial, heavy industrial, got 3 oil refineries in our jurisdiction. So it's an interesting mix of stuff to deal with. So that's a little bit about our jurisdiction. Regarding the building code and reach codes, in Contra Costa County, we generally have not done a lot of local amendments to the state building code. There's a lot of variation from jurisdiction to jurisdiction in that. Some jurisdictions are really proactive in amending the state building code. There's a few big cities that almost have like their own building code, just unique to them. We don't have that history. We've, for the most part, accepted the state building code with relatively few local amendments. But during the time that I've been the building official, which has been for 10 years now, I've seen a shift on our board in being more interested in considering energy reach codes. So that's been a promising development. And started to see that about 5 years ago, kind of coincided with our board's adoption of a climate action plan and a decision to participate in community choice energy. MCE now is our community choice energy program in Contra Costa County. So there's a lot of interest in issues around sustainability and energy efficiency in recent years. And so during this period of time in the last few years, we had 2 reach code proposals that were both initiated by members of our board. They asked us to develop something and bring it forward to the full board for consideration. So those are the 2 things I'm going to talk a little bit more about. The first one was in 2015, and this is the one that got approved. It was a reach code concerning electric vehicle charging stations. And it came about right on the heels of the state putting requirements for electric vehicle charging stations into the California Building Code for the first time, which happened in July of 2015. And when that happened, one of our board members got very interested in EV charging and said, why don't we try to do a reach code? So we developed that in partnership with that board member and brought it forward to the full board. It includes additional requirements for the number of parking spaces designated for EV charging for multifamily residential. One of the interesting aspects of our local, thank you. One of the interesting aspects of it is that we're requiring the installation of the charging device, not just the installation of the electric device. So that's something a little different that we're doing. So like I said, that was a successful one. And then we had later, in 2017, we came back to our board. Again, this was at the urging of one of our board members with a version of the model solar ordinance that was being sponsored by BayREN and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. This was an ordinance to require rooftop solar on new residences. So we brought this one forward, and it did not get approved, and that's because our local building industry association got active on this issue and persuasively argued to a majority of our board members that this was going to have a negative impact on housing construction, that the added cost of installing the solar was going to have a negative effect on housing construction, and basically encouraged our board to just wait for the state to insert rooftop solar requirements into the California Building Code. And so they were effective and persuasive in making that case, and the ordinance did not get approved when it came before our board. So what what lessons have we learned from this experience? A couple things. So my first point here is acceptance of breach codes may be less predictable in the absence of public outreach. We didn't do very much public outreach for either of these. You know, looking back on it, I think we should have done more. Certainly, when you bring something to your board of supervisors or your city council, you know, it's always nice to have some sense of what's happen when you do that. And one way of getting a better read on that is to do more public sense of what the key stakeholders think about it and what kind of positions they're going to take. We didn't do that because our people wanted to move quickly, and from a staff perspective, it was a lot less work not to have to do a bunch of public meetings and outreach and all that. But in hindsight, it probably hindered our success, or at least hindered our ability to know what was going to happen with that from forward. My next point is that, you know, if we had done more outreach, would it have improved the odds of success? I'm not exactly sure. We would have probably known better what was going to happen, but it may not have resulted in both of these proposals being adopted. And on the EV charging one, you know, it did get adopted. We didn't do a lot of public outreach. Had we done more public outreach, maybe we would have provoked more opposition too. So I'm not sure doing more public outreach would have actually increased the odds. And then one last point that I've noticed in the last few years, I would say in particular, there's definitely a trend emerging towards deregulation, say, you know, coinciding with the growing issue of lack of housing supply in California, Bay Area. So that's something that's kind of a countervailing force. You know, you've got, on one hand, the interest in sustainability and energy efficiency is propelling a lot of groups that are reach those. On the other hand, this force that's kind of moving in the other direction of let's reduce the rules for housing so that we can build more housing. So I think that's just something to be aware of, and something you may have to contend with as a counter argument.
All right, can everyone hear me? Can everyone on the webinar hear me? All right, well, Bill Kelley, County of Marin, thrilled to be here and would like to thank BayREN for this opportunity to share with you our Marin perspective on this engaging topic. And I would say that Kellen, who just sat down and told me to speak up into the mic, who is a BayREN representative and also on our sustainability team, I think that he would share with you that the good work that BayREN has been doing these last few years have made a noticeable difference in Marin. I'd also like to take an opportunity to acknowledge Alice Sandmiller, also on the BayREN team, and also on our sustainability team in Marin, who is actually the author of the work that I'm going to share with you today. So very quickly, a couple of things about Marin, just so you get a picture of what the island of Marin is really like. Marin is a colorful example of build out because we are more than 90% built out. And I'm making this point specifically because we're already where most of you will be at some point, but we're already there. So mostly built out. We have about 68,000 plus or minus residents that live in the unincorporated area, and they do so in approximately 29,000 dwelling units. right? So these are mostly single-family homes. There's maybe 4,000 apartment dwellings, something like that. So it's mostly single-family homes. And I really can't speak to the untold number of ADUs that exist within those 29,000 dwelling units. But we're very curious about that part. Okay, so we issue, the Building and Safety Division of our Community Development Agency issues around 3,500 building permits a year. Now, keep in mind that because we're mostly built out, what that really means is that we're issuing these building permits to people who already own structures, because we're more than 90% residential, right? And we only build maybe 2-3 dozen new homes a year. And probably most of those are tear down rebuilds, frankly. So really the market, if you want to think of it this way, is in people making modifications or improvements to homes they already have. Okay, important point because I'm going to reference that later. Okay, so remodeling permits are what you might think of as our bread and butter, so to speak. However, the dynamics change. So just think of it this way. Building departments are the enforcement mechanism for any reach code that you're thinking of, you're contemplating, and I encourage you to contemplate those. In a built environment, one that's mostly built out, the customer really, the constituent really doesn't need much from us. And that's a very different dynamic than when your jurisdiction is building subdivisions, which I presume you do, right? The subdivision environment, new construction, that is what building departments are used to, right? For decades and decades in California. That's a certain dynamic. They need something from you and you need to figure out how to provide it. And then because the building permit is the piece that all these other requirements like reach codes get added on to, right? You've got a feasible enforcement mechanism through the building permit. Flip that, the environment's mostly built out. Now customers, constituents, they can remodel the inside of their entire home without getting a building permit. And most of them do. We estimate, permit avoidance to be 70% of all construction work in our jurisdiction, okay? So that changes the dynamic. So now we have to find a way of appealing to those individuals. So our permitting approach for building permits, for reach codes, is viewed much more like a business where we need to understand our customers, our constituents. We need to understand what their needs are, where they're coming from, and figure out how to attract them, so to speak, just like the business, to what it is we have to provide them, recognizing that it's going to cost them to do that, right? Okay. So important not to candy coat this and kind of tell it the way it is. Okay. Which slide are you on? Oh, perfect. Excellent. Thank you. If I was trying to multitask, this never would happen. Okay. So our approach to reach codes for this purpose, or probably any reach code, is really designed to be simple. I mean, simple. Critically simple, easy and flexible, because we recognize that every single one of our constituents has their own lives, their own priorities, and we're trying to get their attention. Hey, look at this cool thing that we're doing, and we need to be able to get a little piece of their awareness to communicate to them. So it has to be like super simple, super easy, and flexible. Allow them to adapt it to what their needs are, instead of trying to tell them you need to do it this way. Connected to the larger picture. Now, interestingly, our constituency pretty much philosophically is aligned with the larger picture of reducing the impacts to climate change. saving energy, and these kinds of things. So the alignment, the essential alignment is there. Now it's, the goal really is to figure out how to engage that alignment so that we draw them into an engaging interaction with us. And of course, we have to be straightforward and consistent, by all means consistent. So in connecting the dots, which is what we've attempted to do here, we are trying to trigger the LED in their head to, I get it, right? That's the whole point. And we have about this much of their focus and attention to it. So we have to be like, really effective in getting that little light bulb. Do step one. Then do step two. You got, if your home is this size, do step 2A. If your home is that size, do step 2B. And what you're seeing here is the new construction. And then you've got this step 3, which is for all projects, which is EV readiness. Now, I should point out something. We've had reach codes in Marin starting in 2002, I think, which was focused just on energy. And then later, building. And then at some point, after Alice came on, I think, we started asking the duh question, well, why are we having two different, kind of confusing and easy to understand. You can get all the details if you follow the link on the website there. Okay. Challenges. Well, we had an entire consortium, you might say, of local governments within Marin, all the Marin cities, small jurisdictions, as well as the county, and they all worked together back in 2008 to get on the same page with regard to a green building code. And that really kind of set the stage for, and it was a crowd pleaser with our governing body, I can tell you, because they really love this idea, consistency for, doesn't matter where you live in Marin. Then what we noticed was something interesting. When we went to do the next iteration of that, most of those other jurisdictions, the smaller ones, kind of dropped off of the green energy or green building reach code and just fell back to CalGreen. Maybe CalGreen Tier 1 or something, but not us. We continue to press forward and upward because our governing body wants us to be the greenest in the world. And of course, they want everyone else to be the greenest in the world too. So that led to identifying the limits and effectiveness of our reach codes within a built-out community. Remodels and permit avoidance have to figuring out all of that, and identifying that we have a fairly low compliance. So the focus, I would say the overriding focus on our strategy and perspective in Marin is on how to engage in a win-win way with our customers. I would encourage you to consider that if it's relevant for your jurisdictions as you move forward. Next steps, really more questions than answers at this point. Alice is on point for waiting to see what the cost effectiveness studies look like as they come out. And we will continue as a practice the stakeholder engagement, which is primarily with those cities, but also with our customer base as well. We will continue with the current philosophy unless we identify something that really suggests that we should change that to become more effective. And we ask the question, which you have probably also asked the question, well, how much more efficient can we actually get? I mean, really, if the state continues to ramp up their requirements. And what we're trying to do is to support with a cost effectiveness study that if we go above that, doesn't that kind of suggest that we're going to be like approaching the limit here over time? It's going to be getting less and less. And so it's raised interesting conversations among our team with regard to, well, what really is our role in this moving forward. So we are, however, looking at other ways through local ordinance of potentially having a positive impact on this, one of which is we're currently exploring the feasibility of a low carbon concrete ordinance. If you think about the climate impacts from concrete manufacture, you know, that could be pretty big, right? So we're excited about that. That's in the works right now. And we continue to kind of meditate, that's a Marin thing, on how to become the most effective given the limited tools that we have. And by that, let me clarify, I'm talking about the legislative tool of the building permit, right? Limited tool in a built environment that's mostly built out where the customer doesn't want anything from us except really to be left alone. So that's pretty much what we have to offer. Thank you.